Well, hi, everyone. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch. And as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping and where? We're in New Hampshire, of course. And by the big wheel himself, the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. All right, we are absolutely positively thrilled to have our guest here with us this week. And Bob Lobel always handles the introductions. And Robert, take it away.
Thanks, Lynchy. Bob Ryan we've been friends for a long time, and I really have missed you, buddy. I haven't seen you in a while, other than having to watch you on television. It's a treat, but it's not quite the same as being with you because Ryan he was one of the original sports writers turned television guys. I mean, there was a time when never the two shall meet. There was sports writers on one side, TV guys on the other. And then we finally realized, Mike and I both did, that there was a vast wealth of knowledge out there that was untapped. And we finally decided to figure out how to tap it. And that was just bring them on and talk to these guys. Ryan was one of those guys. Wouldn't you agree, Mike? And I know he worked at Channel 5 for a couple of years that he hated, not because it was Channel 5, but because he just hated it. He just brought it all the time. He just brought the passion. He just brought his A game, and we loved him. And he was a groundbreaker, a journalist moving from, whether these guys admit it or not, moving from print to electronics, and it helped both factions. And author of 14 books, National Sportscaster of the Year 4 times. One of my favorite people on television, Tony Kornheiser, called him the quintessential American sports writer, and who's to argue? But thank you, Rocky, for being here, and it's great to see you. But first, I have to ask you about your fellow worker, Dan Shaughnessy. I know he's been in the hospital, and most people are kind of shocked to hear that he's had a quadruple bypass. But the question is, how's he doing?
I spoke with him the day before yesterday, and he, in the context of what we're talking about, with having had the quadruple bypass, I had one myself 9 years ago, March 3rd, coming up. He's doing fine. He's recuperating on a normal pace. He's regaining strength, and his voice is, almost all the way back. About 85% the voice I remember, and he was in good hands. If you're going to get sick, folks, get sick in Boston. That's my big advice, and you can't go wrong in that regard. We are the medical hub of America, and Dan is in good hands, and hopefully he'll bounce back, and in a couple of months, perhaps or less, you'll be seeing that byline again.
I know when you had yours, Bob, you lost an awful lot of weight. What advice would you have him in terms of like you? I'm sure Dan is eager to get back to the keyboard. What will your advice be along that line?
Well, listen to the doctors. This is like anybody does. Do what they tell you. And I had to amend my culinary ways. I cut back on the red meat. I cut back on the junk food. I cut back on the snacks. And reoriented myself, but not fully. I can eat anything I want in reasonable moderation. And I have. By the way, I am blessed to be married for 59 years to a superb cook. Elaine Ryan is a great, unprofessional cook, and she can make things happen out of nothing, and so that's a big bonus. So I did lose 35 or so pounds, and fortunately, I've been able to keep it off.
I don't know how she stuck it out for 59 years. That's the only thing I can't imagine. But I remember one of the great quotes that I can remember you saying was about John Harrington and the Red Sox back during that iteration. And you called "The Emperor Has No Clothes." It was one of the great moments in television as far as I was concerned, but only you would say that, and it just kind of opened the door. I know you must remember that. You must remember that it was true, and it's probably twice as true now in this iteration of the Boston Red Sox. I don't know where to begin. Do we talk about the dynasty with Benedict and what's on television with the Patriots? Do we talk about the Red Sox? Or do we talk about the Celtics? Where do we go from here?
Well, if you want to talk on a positive note, you start with the Celtics naturally, and the year they're having, and what their possible destination is number 18, and they are a favorite. No one has more talent. They are the most talented 1 to 8, and maybe 9 now with Xavier Tillman. We'll see how they implement him in the league. What they have to prove to the world is that they have the poise under pressure and the toughness, the mental toughness, such as was displayed by Miami when they beat the Celtics last year. That's unproven. But they certainly, they've been knocking on that door now. This core group, these two guys, Tatum and Brown, and before him, Smart, and so, but it's all good. I mean, they have it in their hands to do it.
Porzingis the difference?
Oh boy, yes, it's a major difference. I am happily acknowledging that I was wrong about the trade. I wasn't against it, but I was wary. I was play literally in 2 years, and go back to the Knick days. And my image of him with the Knicks was the 7'3" guy, exclusively shooting jump shots from the corner and not acting as a 7'3" guy. And then he went to Dallas, and next thing you know, he's in Washington. And I didn't know the circumstances why he left Dallas. And I hadn't paid attention to what he was doing in Washington. Only after they got him, I looked it up. Oh my God, he scored 23 points a game last year when I wasn't looking, because nobody watches the Wizards. And that's a fact. So I wasn't prepared for the guy we got. Now, I was told before he arrived here by a good source that A, he's a better defensive player than you think. And B, the reason he left Dallas, or the reason that the problems ensued in Dallas, was that indeed he wanted to post up a little more and not just be a jump shooter. But Rick Carlisle, according to what I was told by a pretty good source, was preferring to have him be a perimeter player more than a post player. I'm just looking for balance from the guy, and I think we're getting a reasonable amount of it here this year. They can throw the ball into him down low when they need a basket, and that's something we haven't had in a while. And if they use it and balance it out properly, they'll be really good. Now, the whole thing is, we know, is that his injury history is very daunting. And even this year, we've seen his nicks in there, just a twist there and a bruise there and this, and the keeping, he has to be treated like a Ming Vaz. We got to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs. And I think they're going to do their best to try to do it.
Well, there's a picture at the All-Star game of Larry Bird and Jason Tatum. And I was stunned to learn that it was the first time the two had ever met.
Interesting, because you think of Larry as the one of the handful of most distinguished alums that they've ever had, but this means that he hasn't come back to Boston for anything, and he became a coach of the Pacers, a general manager more without the title of the Pacers, and he hasn't really spent any time back here. So sometimes alums like Havlicek would be around every once in a while, and other guys would be around once in a while in the old days. But he hasn't been that kind of an alum, So there's really been no place for them to interact in here, and I don't know where else they would have done it. Apparently, Tatum's thrilled. This is made his week, his day, his season, meeting Larry, and I love to hear that he has that respect for Larry. But that was a nice little get together.
It's amazing. Well, first of all, one guy you never really talk about a lot, not you particularly, but every once in a while people say what a great job Brad Stevens has done. But I mean, he really has kind of put this team together through the grace. Well, him and Danny Ainge, I guess, together.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. With as far as Brad's concerned, consider that we were in the second anniversary of one of the most unheralded and surprisingly great trades in their history, getting Derek White. I mean,
right, absolutely.
He was under the radar for me. I had to look after the fact to see he averaged 14 points a game the year before in San Antonio. I didn't pay any attention to him. I knew nothing about his history, which is interesting because he started out at a small college and then he went to Colorado, transferring up from Division II, or more or less. And we were amazed to see. He's such a perfect Popovich player. He's so smart. He's so poised. He's so calm. He's so measured. He's so versatile. And he's just a dream. And then they get Holiday. He fell out of the sky. if it's all about Damian Lillard, pouting his way out of Portland, and that is the reason that Holiday was available, and they were the ones who were the lucky beneficiaries of that, and getting him, was a no-brainer if you've got a chance to get him, and Brad definitely grabbed him, and now we've got a really, really solid coach's dream of a backcourt. And of course, the Porzingis trade is making him look very good too. Right now, I don't think there'd be any question that if the voting were done right now, in the middle of February, that Brad Stevens would be the NBA executive.
Anything short of an NBA championship at this stage, with all the years that Tatum and Brown have been together, and with the new elements that put together, anything shy of a championship be a major disappointment in the Boston sports scene?
Everybody will make his or her individual judgments as to how major it is. It'll be a disappointment because they have the talent to do it, and if barring some injury excuse that could happen, if such as happened in 2010 or when 2009, when Garnett was unavailable, and they had a better team than they had the year before when they won, but they didn't get it done because he wasn't available when they needed him. It'll be a disappointment. Some people will call it a major, big disappointment. They've knocked on the door. They've teased us. And now with Porzingis, they have an element that they lacked, and there's really no excuse in that regard. It'll be a disappointment. And it's a now team. I've been saying this with people all year. I mean, think about this. In a league where a lot of the good players are still quite young, and some teams are quite young, like Oklahoma City, for example, nobody under the age of 25 gets playing time on this team that merit. They're in their prime. These guys. And even guys like Pritchard and Hauser, they're both 25 or 6, and now comes Tillman, who's that age. So they have no experience excuses whatsoever. The only person who has an experience excuse is the coach. He's still learning his trade. I think he's doing fine, but the fact is that he's got stuff to prove too.
Who's going to prove Barkley wrong? Which guy on this team is going to be able to take away the image of being too soft?
Well, too soft in terms of, probably a guy who's physically is very strong, but we're talking about doing it the right thing at the right time. Brown. I think Brown, maybe a little bit of Tatum, but it's those two guys. They're the one. They're the Bird and the Kale. They're the Ruth and the Gehrig. They're the whatever pairing you want. That's our version of that one. And Brown gets a bit erratic at times. And he, this ball handling issue, this turnover issue. We wanted to make sure that he doesn't dribble into traffic and come away without the ball in the playoffs. At least more than once or twice a game instead of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. He's still suspect in that regard, and that's not just physical ability. That's common sense and mental toughness.
I want to shift gears just to get into this whole dynasty thing, because I read Ben Bolin in the Globe today, and I think we're entering probably at least a month of some really nasty he said stuff coming out with Robert Kraft playing Pontius Pilate at the head of this whole scene that's going on. We saw in the promo Danny Amendola say, we work for Bill, but we play for Tom. Is this going to be the campaign to disgrace the head coach and elevate the image of the owner?
Well, that's interesting. That was a very jarring quote. And I don't know about campaign or what, it's not like Bob Kraft is totally beloved either. I acknowledge I think he's been a very good owner. Hiring Kraft alone was enough to, hiring Belichick alone, which a lot of us thought was crazy. And I did. I thought the man was unhinged. I think that's the word I used after the episode in New York, but don't want to be the HC, the NYJ and all that stuff. And he just seemed like he wasn't, he just wasn't stable. And anyway, we know how that worked out. I would hesitate to go to the bars to call it some kind of orchestrated media campaign, but there's going to be a lot of questions that have been arisen about how the things really worked. And now we look at Tom himself. When Tom left, I said, well, wait a minute. He gave us a warning with that famous interview with Jim Gray, in which he was asked essentially, "Are you officially appreciated here?" And the answer was, "I plead the fifth." I always go back to that. Hey, folks, that was a warning, and so. stuff was going on, obviously, all the time.
I think from what I've been able to understand in the rest of the dynasty, and it's going to be fascinating, the things about Aaron Hernandez, fascinating, the things about the Spygate, fascinating, and also the relationship that you talked about, Mike, that Kraft, and again, his version, but I think as the Dynasty series goes along here over the next few weeks, that you'll show that the relationship between Belichick and Brady lasted, although it lasted 20 years, it really lasted 10 years. That after about the 10-year period, it was starting to fall apart. And Kraft has put himself in a position of the guy that held it all together.
Yeah.
That's his position right now, and that's what they're at least going to be selling in the documentary. That Kraft kept these two guys who were, married together and then basically divorced or separated after 10 years together, and then until it finally couldn't be kept together. That's going to be the version.
Yeah, he's specifically stating that. That's a definitive statement that he's making in Dynasty, is that I kept this thing together. And so, with Bob Kraft in general, just the big picture, I always say how Ted Williams used to say, so famously said, when I die, when I retire, I want to walk down the street and have people point to me and say, there goes the greatest hitter who ever lived. And 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, at least I said, Bob Kraft wants people to walk down the street and point to him and say, there goes the greatest owner that ever lived. So he's going to protect his image as best he can. That is for sure.
Yeah,
and he's got, he's got to pretend that he never went to get a massage, if you know what I mean.
He's like Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. He doesn't want to be liked. He wants to be well liked.
That's very good. I like that. Yes, and I think he does. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And that's his. He's got this desperate desire to get into the Hall of Fame, from what I read in here every year when that voting comes up, and that he will not feel fully fulfilled even with the 6 rings until he gets in the Hall of Fame.
Although in the first couple of episodes that have since have come out, he had some interesting things to say. The couple things I couldn't. First of all, he admitted that they weren't kosher in clearing the snow in the snow game. That they probably violated a few rules, and then to admit that his son left the game early, it was just stunning. Things like that, and he was really on mark when he said it was probably the most important game in the history of the Patriots franchise, and it was the last game at that stadium, whatever they called it at that time. But it was fascinating, the whole Tuck rule.
It's one of my most memorable nights and events in all my 48 years now, 44 years since, and 50. What I'm talking about. Anyway, that night, it's high on my list of memorable occasions, and the game was surreal, and then the way it ended, and the Tuck rule, which we didn't even know was a thing, which I say was a right call of a bad rule, and that was a fumble. You and I know it. We all know it was a fumble. Even Brady knew it was a fumble. He said it in the first Dynasty, or one of the first two, whichever. I've seen 2 episodes, so it is it's the most pivotal game in the NFL's. It affected history to this day. About, do you think the Patriots would have won? This whole thing would have happened if they don't win that first one? I don't. Somehow or other, the dynamics would have been different. And it all comes down to a couple of things, the Tuck rule and Vinatieri and that kick and the greatness. One of the 2 most famous snow kicks ever. The other, Pat Summerall, had one in 58 or 9 that was incredible too, and a very important Giants game. But this has affected NFL history for 20 years and 20 plus years. In fact, when he left to go to Indianapolis, I said he should be given a $10 million farewell check. Thank you very much. I mean it. I meant that. That's gospel truth. I said it and I meant it. I should have given him a $10 million bonus because there, but for that right foot of his, it ain't happening, folks.
Absolutely.
One other thing that I have since learned is that Les Moonves of CBS, that was the first playoff game that they ever held at night. It was scheduled to be played in the afternoon. And then Les Moonves wanted a trial to see how it would react play in the country because they just never played a game at night, playoff game. And Kraft lobbied to get that game played at night. Had it been played in the day, there would have been no snow.
Wow, it's just, well, it was very interesting to hear him admit about the shenanigans about not clearing it, and the idea that they were a good snow team and they believed themselves to be a good inclement weather team in general, and snow in particular, and that why not make it life a little hard for those dilettantes from the West Coast, right? I mean, that was an interesting admission, I must admit.
Fabulous. There was some great stuff in there, including the Bledsoe stuff. To me, that was Ernie Adams stuff was priceless.
Well, first of all those years, I never laid eyes on Ernie Adams, so
right.
never.
Right.
And so that was I told my wife Elena as we're watching this, I said, this is like so revelatory. We've never seen the guy, and hear from him, and oh yeah, and we all knew, he was the alter ego of Bill Belichick, and the buddy from Andover Academy, and the whole thing, and yeah, absolutely. But anyway, it was very very interesting. Oh, let me just say, Blue Bledsoe. I loved everything I heard from him in that, and I was a big fan of the person. So I defended, yeah, you guys famous are having fun with me in the clip, and I said he's gonna, we all know he's gonna get the job back and all that, which is, I think it was a universal.
Hey, I didn't know the clip was. I just saw it because I was the only one right of the four of you sitting on the set.
Right, it was a opinion, and I was in the middle and the wrong side. Anyway, it was such a good person. I thought good guy, and a rootable person, and I was rooting for him. So I'm sure that my judgment was colored by the fact that I was rooting for the guy on a personal basis to keep his job, and not knowing anything about the kid. Didn't know anything.
Bobby, after the first Super Bowl, after the win in New Orleans, he came over and I interviewed him and told him, I still think you're the best quarterback this franchise ever had. So don't even worry about being on the wrong side of that argument.
Well, let's remember the history and when he, that he was the linchpin of everything when Parcells came in, and the decision to draft to pick the right guy, that was the big decision, him or Meyer, right? Rick Meyer, and they picked the right guy, and you go down in history and look at his starts. I mean, his first 5 or 6 years pre-Brady, he's high on the list of all the yardages and touchdowns and everything of all the quarterbacks through that stage of their career, and historically. And he did have a great arm, and he was a good quarterback. But I know he wasn't that mobile. We all knew that. But I said, if you knew him, he was so decent. He was just so civil and just so polite and respectful, and as a guy with us and with people, And I just rooted for the guy.
Lynchy, Alan Miller, I talked to him a long time 2 nights ago on the phone, and he begged me to ask you to tell the story. It was in Washington. He thinks it was in Washington. You were in a meeting with Belichick, somebody, I don't know, a couple other people, a pregame meeting, and can you tell the story? Do you remember
is it the one where? Well,
yeah, I think you're right.
I used to do the preseason games, and we'd have a production meeting the day before the game. It'd be Don Criqui, Randy Cross, and myself.
That's it.
And this was, pretty good access that I had. And so Don Criqui always asked the first question, who's impressed you the most? Tom Brady. Well, what guy has made the most improvements this last year? Tom Brady. Well, what guy would you say has a chance to crack the line? Tom Brady. The answer to every question was Tom Brady. Now, I had my notebook, as I was taught by Ryan and Gammons. Always carry these spiral notebooks with you. And in it, I had the depth chart from the last home game the previous year. And I'm looking at it as Belichick's extolling the virtues of Tom Brady. And Tom Brady's the fourth string quarterback. A game against the Buffalo Bills the previous December. In fact, I think he was in the stands, wasn't even on the sidelines. And I'm saying, what's going on here? Then we'd have these interviews, and he says, well, I got to get a good look at this Brady kid. Where do you see this Brady kid? He says, he's better. And he would never refer to Bledsoe by name. He referred to him as the other guy. Now, just back step a couple of years earlier when Parcells was the coach, he'd walk in when I was doing the show with him, and I said, how you doing, Bill? Before the cameras were on, he says, I have to get some baby powder today and powder my quarterback's rear end. I yelled at him yesterday, and I think he called mommy and daddy. And I said, so I got to get some baby lotion and wipe his ass with that when practice is over, so he's okay. So this started with Parcells, and this is before we went on camera. And I said, this is really good stuff. And the same theme, I was getting the same vibes from Belichick that he doesn't like this guy. He likes him like Bob likes him, a nice guy, but doesn't like him to be his quarterback. And as it turned out, he wasn't. And I think if Mo Lewis didn't hit Drew Bledsoe on that September night, that it wouldn't be long after that there would have been a quarterback change.
Yeah, but Alan also said that you said and made the comment after they left the room that Bledsoe's toast.
Done.
Yeah,
I don't know who told me, guys, but I remember that sometime in the first couple of weeks after Mo Lewis, that somebody told me that Belichick was corroborating. Belichick was looking for an excuse because he definitely had fallen in love with this Brady kid.
Yes, 100%.
Here's one I remember, though. It's funny. There was, I think, it may be Miami. I think it was Miami, but it doesn't matter. Maybe it does because the guy had played for them. One of the early weeks, they had a road game, and I remember reading in the local paper that the team, and I think it was the Dolphins, have to check the schedule, see if they went to Miami. Couldn't believe that Brady would be playing instead of Damon Heward, who was the official backup. And I guess he had played for Miami, right? Is that it? I think it was Damon Heward is the issue. And they couldn't believe this kid was playing over Damon Heward, the other team. So that's.
What else? Talking about the relationship between Belichick and Brady, that the better that Brady got, the tougher Belichick got on him. The better that Brady was, the tougher Belichick was, and that ended up being the downfall. It was a personality thing. I mean, I couldn't believe, growing up in Ohio and being close to the Browns and all that, I knew a lot of that stuff that went on, but I had no idea until I saw the documentary how bad it really was between Belichick and the Cleveland fans and Kosar. I mean, how much hate there was, and of course, Modell was a big part of that. But that was so eye-opening. But Belichick had that personality issues, for lack of a better word. He just did not handle people. Well, maybe he handled them the only way he knew how, but the Brady thing really fell apart because Belichick got to be so difficult to live with the longer they were together, and the more successful Brady became.
Well, I can't do anything to refute that, and the personality was, he is who he is, and yet he would publicly after games, I can hear in my head him saying, Tommy, and I wouldn't want any other quarterback. I can hear that more than one post gamer, and so publicly he's paying homage to the kid, to the guy at that time. But he's Bill is Bill. Bill's he's a complex person, but who isn't? But he's very complex. There's others.
How about when he lacerated his finger before the AFC Championship game against Jacksonville? And people are asking about it, and so finally, he says, hey, look, we're not talking about open heart surgery here. The guy can't cut his finger. But you talk to Matt Liebman, the doctor, who found this special tape to put on his finger that made it all work, and said, the guy was probably 12 hours away from not playing in that AFC Championship game.
Bob, and all your accomplishments, is, the books you've written, including the one, I'm not, hang on, I showed you this earlier, but
Scribe, my favorite. That was my favorite, Bob.
Well, thank you.
yeah, that's that. That's Scribe, My Life in Sports by Bob Bryant, who was our guest today. Of all the things, all the awards, Hall of Fames, et cetera, what's your proudest? What brings you the most joy?
Well, obviously, of course not. No, I'm very honored and flattered to be in a number of Halls of Fame. The National Sports, which is now the National Sports Media Association, which was born in 1959 as the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association, but which has had to rename itself to acknowledge that we're in the 21st century and there's different forms of sports coverage now. I'm in their Hall of Fame since 2011. That's very important to me because that's a vote of peers and it's a distinguished group, and every great sportscaster and writer of the last 70 years, 60 years, are enshrined in there, and to have your name among that group is very, very flattering.
Well, that's interesting. I can understand that, but there was such a great roster of writers at the Globe with you guys. You guys had a team that was really unbeatable. You can go down the names. Besides, you, Shaughnessy, and Jackie, and the Celtic legacy, all the other things, Montville, Ray Fitzgerald, on and on. Go ahead.
Bud Collins, the greatest
Right.
tennis writer who ever lived, and one of the most interesting and gracious human beings that I ever encountered.
That is great.
And what a fun guy to be around for 5 seconds, but a brilliant person at what he did, and kind of a mentor to me. If I had one at the Globe that when I started as a summer intern in 1968, the person that kind of took me by the hand at times was Bud. The incomparable Will McDonough. Nobody like him will ever be in sports writing again and have the kind of contacts, universal contacts that he had, the personality that endeared him to all these different people, whether it was Joe Cronin or Red Auerbach or Carl Yastrzemski, or it doesn't matter. It was amazing.
Al Davis.
Bill Parcells. Anyway, he was special, Will. You're right. The Globe had a incredible. I remember in the '80s, our bench, for playoffs, for people like Mike Madden, Leslie Visser, Ian Thompson. I mean, please, that's a bench. That was. We had a point in time, guys, in the '80s in which each of the 4 people that were primarily associated with the 4 major sports, Will in football, Peter Gammons in baseball, Fran Rosa in hockey, and myself, each have entered into the respective writers' wings of the 4 sports halls of fame. No other paper can make that statement, and obviously never will.
No, it was the greatest cast of all time, greatest assembled cast of all time.
Unbelievable. When I was young, breaking in, I would eavesdrop, like get down to run-ins in New York. The Celtics would play in the Knicks, and all you guys would be covering the game, and that's where you congregate, and just to listen and hear it was just incredible. I couldn't believe I was standing next to so many legends. When we were in college, Bob, like 10 of us lived in this big, probably 4 different rooms over at Harvard, but we had one subscription to the Globe. And whoever got up earliest in the morning, which wasn't very many of us, grabbed the sports page, went in the bathroom and locked the door and kept it in there. And the rest of us saying, hey, I got it next. I want to read Ryan. I want to read Gammons. I got it next. That's the way it was.
One of the great little subplots is, Peter and I started the same day as summer interns in '68, June 10th, I graduated from BC on June 3rd. I started the Globe on June 10th, and the first guy I met was this fellow intern from North Carolina in Groton, Mass, named Peter Gammons. And we found ourselves hitting it off quite readily right from the start.
And
Well, I want to tell
everybody had
people, just listen to this one thing, Bob, and I'll shut up the rest of the way. My senior in high school, our first game was against Gloucester. I still have it in a scrapbook my mother made for me. It says Swampscott wins by Peter Gammons. And then later on that year, we lost for the only time in 7 years. It says by Bob Ryan, Boston Globe.
I remember that game, and Dana Hughes to a touchdown. My first visit to Swampscott, and Coach Bondi and Stan Bondalevich, and it was such a big story, you guys losing, that I stopped. Of course, we didn't have cell phones, and I stopped at the nearest payphone booth I could find up there to call the office to say, hey, Swampscott just lost, and they put it on page 1 of the sports section in the middle of the World Series that day. No, really, it was such a big story, you guys losing. And I alerted them so they could remake the page. You weren't going to be on page 1 if you won. That was a big deal. That was another day at the office. But you losing, you made page 1 of the A1 of sports because of that. And I was able to make sure you guys got on the front page.
Halloween Day, 1970.
All right, hang on a second. I got to, believe it or not, we have commercials that we throw in here. They're not commercials. They're goodwill announcements, basically, because commercials have a tendency to bring out, unnecessary and unwanted feelings, but these are goodwill announcements. So look at it as a goodwill announcement, because we have a question for you after this, Bob. This is kind of a tradition here. Lynchy's got a very important question for you coming up after I'm done with this. Campers, as my goodwill announcement goes, this is to you. Get ready for 2024 with a new RV. Cold Springs RV has the latest in pop-ups, travel trailers, fifth wheelers, and motorhomes. Believe me, if we hadn't been so busy doing our sports jobs, we'd have been out camping day in and day out. But he's going to have to take my word for it, because this is a goodwill announcement. When you need an RV or service, get to Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. Don't ask where, I'm telling you where. Go check out the all-new Winnebago Access travel trailers now on their lot. Don't forget to tell them Lobel and Lynchy sent you. Learn more at coldspringsrv.com. And with that bit of information, we'll turn it over to Lynch.
All right, because Lobel and Lynch are now working on fixed income swap. We don't pay our guests, but we all know John Madden had his Madden cruiser. And Cold Springs RV, we convinced them to make a Lobel Lynchy cruiser to take anywhere we want to go. So we're going to give each one of our guests a week with a Lobel Lynchy cruiser, and you get to drive cross country. We'll fly you back. The only one condition is you have to pick someone, past, present, alive, or deceased, to ride shotgun with you cross country. And who would you like to have as a riding companion to listen to and to talk to when you're riding cross country?
Oh boy.
I know, it's good. It's a great question. And
you know what? Obviously, it's a tough call on this, but I'll tell you who's one of the most fascinating people and intelligent, bright conversationalists that I ever knew, and he was from your guys' world, Mr. Clark Booth.
Oh,
the Cardinal.
Yes, that would be it. And I'll tell you somebody I know that I have. Well, I don't know. I don't want to. No, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to leave anybody out. So, Clark Booth would be ideal. We would talk about music, theater, books, sports, politics, and in a very fun, civil manner.
Well, there's a whole segment of our audience that probably does not know Clark Booth, so maybe you should explain him, Lynchy.
Clark, go ahead, Vince.
Both of you, go ahead.
Here's Clark Booth. Red Sox are playing the Angels in '86. Clark Booth writes a little piece. He says, Anaheim, interwoven ribbons of concrete with a Taco Bell on every corner. This is Anaheim.
He's the one that called Fenway Park the baseball basilica. And he's the one that introduced me to the concept of it's not busman's holiday, but if you go to something where you don't have to cover, you're going on your own volition, which you're being a patron of the art. And I mean, this is just, and he just fell out of his head, folks. You didn't have to conjure him up. He was, oh my God, what a literate person, really. And I must say, a great crusader. I'm a BC guy, but I must salute a great crusader, and just a wonderful all-around guy, and a wonderful writer who was a brilliant broadcaster, and a brilliant broadcaster who was a wonderful writer, and that was Clark Booth.
Yep. He was. We nicknamed him the Cardinal because he was so versatile. Remember in the 77 or 78, a couple of popes had passed away within weeks of each other, and we sent. Well, not we. Channel 5 sent Clark to the Vatican to cover it.
Correct.
And he'd just stand there, no script, no notes, no nothing. He'd rattle off the previous 15 popes and the history of the Vatican and what's going on right now. Looking for the white smoke. And so when he came back, he became the Cardinal. That was his nickname, among many other ones. And he always had to have we had to have a thesaurus and a dictionary within arm's reach every time he came on the air.
He's the guy that actually talked me into taking over his job at Channel 5 when I had my year and a half stint in television. But, contrary, it was a great experience because I learned the answer to the question was no. Sometimes the answer to the question is always, people think it's got to be yes. It was not for me. It was for somebody else. And I was so grateful I had the opportunity to try it at the place where they treated me very well. Channel 5, it was a great place to work in that industry at that time. But it wasn't for me. It was for somebody else. But Clark, I actually took over his job as a sports reporter. I was never an anchor. I never anchored a show, but I was a reporter for Channel 5 for a year and a half.
There he is, the Cardinal.
Yep.
Bob, that's a great choice. I would have to say that was a really good choice.
Thank you. Now, let me, before we leave, I got to make a goodwill announcement, which is that a week from Sunday, the 3rd of March, there's going to be a story I'm calling to your attention. This is a preview of coming attractions in the Boston Globe. I recently attended a sporting event in my 50th state. And I've also attended Rico and Washington, D.C. So I've now the rounds now. I've been to a sporting event, whether I covered it or went to it as a spectator in each of the 50 states plus D.C. And the Globe is very graciously giving me the space to review a lot of stuff, to explain it. It's going to be, so that's going to be a week from Sunday. And it should be, I wrote it and already, but it's going to be, it's fun. I think you'll enjoy the story.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You gonna give us we have to be surprised on March 3rd?
Well, I've just been to a sporting event in all 50 states. And the 50th, and this is the advertisement here, is South Dakota. And
I was going to ask you about South Dakota.
If you're ever in Brookings, South Dakota, the home of South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, you want to go to Cubby's downtown. You'll have a good time at Cubby's. And that's where you go get a good meal and good couple of beers. And that was my 50th. I went to North Dakota State clash on February 1, and that gave me the 50th state that I needed.
That's unbelievable. You got to be the only person in the face of the earth that's done that.
Well, I don't think you're going to. I'm going to be interested to see the reaction, guys, in the industry, because I don't know how many people can make that statement.
Nobody. I'm best to say nobody.
Well,
I don't think anybody.
And I document them. There's going to be 2 lists, guys. There's going to be a list of each of the 50 states, Puerto Rico and D.C., and what sports I've seen in each of those states. And then
what about North Dakota? Did we go to Fargo?
Yes. No. Grand Forks. Mike, you ready for this?
Yeah.
The 1983 Harvard Crimson NCAA hockey finals.
Yes.
At Grand Forks, North Dakota, University of North Dakota. That's my one North Dakota. I have about 9 or 10 states with one sporting event, but that's my North Dakota. And that was for Channel 5. And it was a dual trip. It started out with BC basketball at Ogden, Utah, where they lost to Virginia and Ralph Sampson. And then from there, we hopped over. I don't know who my photographer was. Probably Donnie Mitchell, Mike, but maybe not. But usually if I traveled, it was with Donnie and the great Donald Mitchell. And so anyway, that's my North Dakota, Harvard Crimson.
Well, now that you mentioned this, the Patriots snow game is one of your top sports memories. What was the top sporting event?
I go by sport. You know, I can't pick one, and then you have all the Olympics too. But I go in basketball. It's still the triple overtime game in '76 with Phoenix. The whole context of it, and the night was just extraordinary, surreal. And baseball, I call it a combination of games 4 and 5 and '04. It took over 11 and a half hours and ended on the same calendar day, because of the fact that Game 5 started at 5 o'clock on that Sunday night. That's Dave Roberts steal the whole bill. Those two games, there's one, and that great comeback. The tuck roll game in football for the Patriots, Duke, Kentucky, and college basketball, my other avocation, and hockey, the 1-0 Game 7 against Tampa Bay in 2011. No penalties, if you recall. And Guy Boucher of the Lightning said it was like 60 minutes of overtime. It was an extraordinary game. So
Good. Glad to know it, but you know what? You deserve it. You deserve to have all the accolades because, as Kornheiser said, the quintessential American sports writer.
Passion. You know what it is, Bob? It's passion. And you know what? You're still through on your first thing you wrote for the Globe, you were throwing 95 miles an hour, and you were still throwing 95 miles an hour around.
And guys, what I say is that I am so glad I did it when I did it and where I did it. I was very blessed in both circumstances.
Well, you know what? It seemed to work. It was like Belichick and Brady, at least for a while.
Let me read this quick spot before we say goodbye to you, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got so many other things to ask you. I'm sorry. I didn't want to talk about the Red Sox. I'm going to really want to get your comments about John Henry and Tom
O'Brien.
You know what?
You're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you could trust as well. Go see the big wheel himself, George Gray at Lexington Toyota. Tell him that Lobel and Lynch sent you, and tell him that Bob Ryan sent you as well. He's going to be thrilled to listen to this. What else we got, Bob? With BC football, you're happy?
BC football, that's easy. BC 41, Notre Dame 39. I mean, and here's the funny part about that one.
He's talking now. He's asking you about Bill O'Brien, and now you're asking him about the best BC football that you ever saw. You guys really think the same subject, but different paragraphs.
But that game, and you know how it went. They were up by 17, and then they 21. And Notre Dame came back, and they're behind now. And here comes David Gordon, who had missed a 24-yarder that would have beaten Northwestern. And you got no faith in him as a kicker. And he's going to kick this field goal. And I said, there's only two things that can happen to myself. It's going to be no good, or it's going to be blocked. So here it goes. And it somehow took a left-hand turn on the way, right?
Yep.
I'm standing up in the front row of the press box at Notre Dame. I've got my stuff, my computer and my satchel ready to go downstairs to interview people and do it. And I went, oh shit, they won. That's exactly what I said. And now I guess my story is going to have a different slant now. But that one will always stick out for me naturally.
I remember when they came home. Remember, Lynchy? They came home over to County Forum.
The bus arrived, and
unbelievable.
Waiting to do live shots, and who's going to get Gordon, who's going to get the quarterback, who's going to get the coach, and it was pretty good. They've had some, and while you were a student, and while you started covering them, some great coaches. Remember Bob Cousy coached there.
I got off the phone with Coos yesterday, and I speak to him because I was the 18-year-old student broadcaster. I was the BBC basketball play-by-play guy in the student station for almost 4 years. So I had to have a relationship with Cousy. And, you were awestruck. It's 2 years after he's retired, and he's one of the most famous athletes in America. And I'm interacting with him. I was in awe. So I've been friendly with Bob Cousy for all those years. We were really good when I was there. We went to the NIT twice, which mattered. We went to the NCAA twice in my 4 years, and football Football wasn't, it was so at that time.
It's on the way up, though. It's on the way up.
But then, the Flutie era, of course, that's the pinnacle as the Flutie era. But that's a bit later.
You missed the Final Four by 1 year. You lost to North Carolina, I think.
We lost in College Park, Maryland. We beat St. John's in the round of 8, and we lost to Carolina. And it was Dean Smith's first Final Four team that beat us. And we led at halftime, or we were down by 1 at half. We were in the game, and they blew us out in the second half.
Our good friend Barry Gallup was on. He also was a basketball player.
I always, Barry, was a kid, when you know the story about Barry, and a kid. He made 2 free throws against Navy to put BC over 100, and the only time, at home. And I remember, we were all cheering like crazy to make those free throws. Barry.
Now that you mentioned over 100, I was just going to ask you about the present day NBA. You seem to have as much enthusiasm, correct me if I'm wrong, as much enthusiasm for this type of NBA that you had during the Bird, McHale, Parrish era. Now, what's that?
I shall gently correct you.
Good.
That is far from the case. I still like basketball. I still love basketball in general, but I am pained by the drift of the game, the dominance of the 3-point mania, as was culminating, as you saw, that farce that took place in Indianapolis on Sunday.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you about. 200 and come on.
I declared before the game that I would watch it until I got angry, and I held in a little bit longer after the first anger, which was the second possession each team had, and I said it's not going to change. Nothing's going to change, and I was right. And at the end of the first quarter, I turned it off and I went to bed, and I literally did. And no, I'm distraught, and yet it doesn't kill my love of the All-Star game. That's a whole other topic. But in general speaking, the way the thing is, I still like it, but I don't like it as much, and I can't like it as much with the dominance of the 3, and so that's one of the reasons I said I'm glad I did it when I did it.
What about the fan? How do you account for the fact that today's green teamers are every bit as excited and enthusiastic for this team as opposed to the team that you and I and Lynch grew up with?
Because, all right, we're now in year 45 of the NBA's adoption of the 3. So do the math on that. It's a generational thing. I'm convinced that if you've grown up with it and you've seen it as its gradual hostile takeover of the sport has taken place, you're comfortable with it. You're not uncomfortable with it the way we older guys are, who remember the game before the 3-point existed, let alone before it got, dominant. I mean, look at the first 5 or 6, even 10 years. I've done it many times, guys. I've done this research. You won't believe how indifferent people were to the 3 in the 80s. Right?
I would. Absolutely. I know what you're saying.
I mean, as 5 years in, there were teams that were taking fewer than 100 threes a season. Okay, so now look, 100 threes a night. So that's what they're used to. This is the game they know, and they don't know the other game, and they don't know. And 85-86 Celtics, pinnacle of basketball artists. I think it's the greatest team of all time. I put them up against any team that ever played, including the Warriors with their 3-point shots. The Celtics can play their game, and the Warriors couldn't play the Celtics game. I'll tell you right now. So that's you be careful. You just let me mouth the soapbox here.
Oh, it was a question I was thinking about asking right from the get-go, and we got involved in so many other different things. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a generational thing. This is the only thing they know.
Right, and so you can forgive them. Forgive them, Lord. They know not what they do. and truly, it's what it is. And I don't care if that sounds condescending. I'm just telling you the truth. You don't know if you never saw the 85-86 Celtics or 87-88 Lakers or the Bad Boys or the Knicks of 1970-71 pass that ball around and the Portland Trailblazers with Walton moved that ball and then you don't even understand how basketball can be played. It is not played that way anymore.
You see it all the time on YouTube, on your phone. It would be like the Celtics, and they're running the floor. All three guys are filling the lanes. Today, those two guys that were filling the lane go to a spot on the outside,
They
right?
run spot.
Yep.
Right. And people pass up 2-point jump hooks to pass it out to a guy could clank a three from the corner. That's a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Every night that's happening everywhere. And it's the currency. And I don't enjoy it as much, but I don't hate basketball or anything like that. I just am frustrated that the way it's gone, but it can still, I still get my interest in. Like when I was in Brookings, South Dakota 2 weeks ago, I saw a terrific college basketball game that had a nice balance of everything. And that's the way it still can be, but at the highest level, it's not going to be that way anymore.
Is the women's game becoming more entertaining than some of the men's games?
Well, Caitlin Clark excluded because she shoots from the logo and she's amazing. But it's the women's game. I said 20 years ago is the men's game of 30 years ago, without which is with you, because they can't make up for their mistakes by jumping and blocking shots the way men do. That it's not about dunking. It's about moving the ball. It's about playing the game the quote unquote right way. It's true more so than ever. But they have a better balance of the three and the inside game. And so actually it is a better take in generically right now. Absolutely. And of course, when you go to watch Caitlin play, that's a whole other thing. There's never been anything in the women's sport like her. There will be more because in the NBA, once upon a time, Curry's the only guy that shot from 3 feet beyond the arc. And now more and more people are doing it. And now kids in high school are training themselves to do it. And you're going to see more of it. You're going to see a wider range of shots. But
I felt like I was watching. I watched the Michigan game last week with Caitlin Clark, and I felt like I felt when I was watching Maravich when he was at LSU.
That was very good.
How many has he got? How many has he put up? And I looked at his average. He only averaged 5 assists per game. He doesn't even dish the ball like Caitlin does.
No, she had 14 assists in that 49-point game. But how about dramatic presence? Imagine the world. There's going to be a big audience, TV audience, national audience for this game. She's going to break the record. She only needs 8 points, so she's going to do it. She gets it done in 2 minutes and 12 seconds, 3 shots. And the third one, she said before she'd like to do it with a shot from the logo, so-called. She did it with a shot from the logo. She came down, pulled up from 30 plus feet and drilled it. That woman that young lady, she's a show person as well. Oh my God, she's the best thing to come along for women's basketball in a while, and it's going to be interesting to see what their ultimate ramification is. Now, they don't win, they're not necessarily the favorite. South Carolina is still the favorite, but do you want to see her? She's going to be she's the face of college basketball. You can't name a college basketball player who's going to be player of the year. Quick,
Caitlin Clark. Right?
Zach Edey back again, maybe so, but she's the star of college basketball.
Don't you think NBC blew it by putting that game on Peacock and not putting it on so that reruns of whatever?
Don't talk about Peacock. Peacock's a dirty word.
Well, we had to get it, and we have it, so I was able to watch the game.
Yeah, I had it too.
He is the scribe, and we are happy to have him on today.
Great to be with you guys.
Bob,
great.
What an honor it was. It was just so great. And
don't get carried away, Lynchy. I mean, it was great having him. Let's get carried away.
And I can't wait till March 3rd to celebrate a half century of Bob Ryan, and we had him for an hour today. Bob, thanks so much.
You're welcome, guys.
See ya. And don't forget to follow us on UnAnchoredBoston.com.